Hi there, everyone. I just want to welcome you to this community connection event. This is Why Does My Pet Do That? We're going to be talking about why our pets do different behaviors that we might find problematic and what we can do to address those sorts of behaviors when we see them. All right, so just to start off, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Robyn, and I'm a member of the training team here at the shelter. I have a bachelor's degree in zoology, and I've been studying animal behavior in both wild and domesticated species for about 5 years now. And I've been doing professional animal training for about 4 of those years. So I'm really glad to be here and to talk with you all about these sorts of different problem behaviors that we see in our dogs. Um, the other person pictured here is Donna Van Sickle, and they're my supervisor. I'm really, really lucky to be able to be part of this team. All of the logos that you see across the bottom of this slide are all of the organizations that we as a team are affiliated with. So it's really, really great to be be a part of such a well-educated and fun group of people. All right, so just before we really get into things, I wanted to talk a little bit of housekeeping. I'm assuming at this point, probably most of you have experience with Zoom, but just so you all are aware, right now you're all muted and your videos are off, which is great. That helps kind of minimize the bandwidth that we're using and help prevents echoes through different people's computers and devices. So I ask that you remain muted and keep your videos off unless I kind of prompt for questions, and then you can feel free to unmute yourself. We're also recording this presentation, hopefully to be put up on YouTube for you all to be able to watch again later. So look for that in the recap email that we send out afterwards. And just if you guys are having any trouble seeing the presentation or anything like that, definitely, type something in chat, let me know what's going on, and hopefully I can get that fixed. Also about the chat, if you guys have any questions while we're going through that you're worried that you're going to forget by the time that I ask for questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I will definitely get to those. So feel free to put those there. And now that I've kind of introduced myself and we've had this little introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video as well. All right. So just a little bit about our shelter. We are a life-saving community, which means that all the animals that come to us are given the best chance that they can to get adopted. We're really only able to be that way because of community support. So if you volunteer, donate, foster, adopt, come to these presentations, right, you make this happen. So thank you for doing that. And also a big thank you to Purina for making community connection events like this possible, for their generous financial support. That's really great. We have now a bunch of community connection events all through this next year that are all made possible because of Purina. So that's really, really good for us. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so these are some of the topics that we're going to be covering in today's presentation. We're going to be talking about what problem behaviors really are and why our pets engage in those. We'll talk about kind of the approach that we bring to figuring out what's going on and solving those sorts of problems. And then we'll go through a lot of examples of different behavior challenges for cats and dogs. And I'll be opening it up to questions from all of you guys at different places in this, so that if you're having problems or you're wondering things about your own pets, you can bring up those questions then. All right, so first, why are our animals engaging in these sorts of behaviors? So animals engage in what to us are nuisance or problem behaviors for only one real reason, which is that that behavior works for them to get their basic needs met. They live in a human environment, right, and not a cat or a dog environment. So it's not really made to accommodate most of their natural behaviors. Thinking that cats really like to scratch on things and we really like to keep our furniture unscratched, right? Dogs are, they bark. That's just what they do, and that's very annoying to a lot of us, right? So they're in an environment that really doesn't work for a lot of their natural behaviors. They don't know human rules, right? So we have to teach them. And the reason I put problems in quotation marks here and in the topic overview is because really these behaviors that we see as problems are only problems to us, right? For our pets, it works. So it's not really a problem at all. And so we like to kind of shift our perspective and think of these behavior problems as behavior challenges, right? So it's that change of perspective that really leads to behavior change, both in us and in our pets, right? So we really want to talk now about how we go about addressing these sorts of problem behaviors. So we come at this from this two-pronged approach, right? We come at it from these two separate directions. One is management and the other is training. So management or prevention, that just focuses on keeping our pets from getting a chance to practice any unwanted behaviors. So that's basically designed to make our lives easier and less frustrating. So in this picture here, the dog is behind a gate, right? Maybe to like the dining room or something like that. It's a lot easier than your dog coming up and trying to jump on the table and get underfoot and begging and all of those things. It's easier for us and easier for them if we just put them on the other side of a gate, right? So that's a really nice management strategy that we can use in a lot of different situations, but really looking at how we can set our pets up so that they don't have to practice that behavior in whatever ways we can. Okay, so the other branch of this, right, is training. So this is teaching an alternative behavior for our pets to perform instead of the behavior that we're having a problem with, right? So we're thinking instead about what we do want the animal to do. So in this picture, you've got a cat touching their nose to a little target ball there. And the target is really a great behavior if you've got a cat that likes to get up on the counter or likes to greet you by running and jumping and clawing at your legs, right? Using a target, getting their nose somewhere else can be a really nice alternative behavior. And that's something that we do want them to do. It's something we can reward them for. So that's a really good one. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with cats. So here's a Google search that came up for why does my cat? And you can see that some of our cat's natural behaviors are pretty confusing to us. So it's really great that people are searching out this information. It's great that you all are here to kind of get more insight into why our animals are doing the behaviors that they're doing. All right, so we're going to focus in on some of the most common behavior challenges that we hear about on our helpline or just kind of in the shelter, right? So we hear a lot about cats biting and clawing, cats that are getting up in the middle of the night, peeing outside of the litter box, and altercations between cats, right? Cat introductions going poorly, or cats that have lived together for a long time, suddenly getting into arguments, right? So these are some of the most common. So we'll start by addressing biting and clawing. So we want to think about this, right, from those two perspectives of management and training, but we also want to think about what is actually the cause of this behavior. Why does it work for your cat? What are they getting out of it? Right. And so when we're thinking about causes, we're really looking for patterns, right? When is it that your cat is biting or clawing? And then how do you react when that happens? right? So maybe your cat is biting you every time you pet their ear, right? Chances are they don't like you petting their ear, and they know that if they bite your hand when you're petting their ear, you're going to pull your hand away, and you're not going to do that anymore. So that's what they're getting out of it, right? They're getting that petting to stop. Some other kittens in particular, right? Lots of clawing from kittens. They use it to get attention. They use it because it feels good, right? There's a lot of different reasons why our cats might do these sorts of things like biting and clawing. So really focusing in on why does it work for your cat? And then next, talking about management. So how do we prevent our cats from practicing biting and clawing? So a really nice one is toys, right? Just having something that your cat can put their mouths on that isn't you. That's kind of what we're looking for with management, right? How can we set them up so that they don't do that? Just having toys on various surfaces throughout your house, within reach in all of your usual places, whenever you've noticed that your cat is biting you the most, right? Setting yourself up so that you just have a really easy go-to if you see your cat coming towards you with that sort of bounce in their step, right? That you see before they bite or claw at you. Now, if they're clawing at something like furniture, right, covering that furniture, I know, that's kind of ugly and sometimes hard to do, but usually these management strategies are temporary until we get that training ongoing, right? So thinking about how you can cover up the area that they're scratching, and then looking for alternatives, right? Cats do have to scratch. That's something that they need. So setting up scratching posts over top of whatever you cover that area with so that they get used to scratching on that post, and then you can slowly move it away from that area if you need to. And you can reward them every time they use the scratching post, right? And that's kind of going into that training aspect, right? What do we want our cats to do instead? So instead of clawing at us or clawing at our furniture, we want them to claw at their scratching post, right? So really rewarding them for that, giving them attention when they're doing the right thing instead of only when they're doing the wrong thing, right? So acknowledging and focusing on things where they look like they're about to go and scratch the furniture, but instead they go and scratch that post, right? Or maybe they approach you and they don't bite you. That's something that you can reward, right? So giving them the attention that they want, even giving them food, treats, right? All of those sorts of things are very rewarding to our cats. So really using that and telling them, yep, that was the right thing. If you do this more, you get more food, you get more attention, and making it worth their while. All right, so for cats that are getting up in the middle of the night, right? First, again, we're gonna talk about the cause of this. Why does this work for your cat? So are they hungry? And when they wake you up, do you get up and feed them? Are they, just really awake in the middle of the night? And when they wake you up, you get up and play with them. Do you give them any kind of attention at all, right? That can be really rewarding. You can think about, are they just bored, right? Are they looking for something to do and they know that you're the person that does the things? So really thinking about what is causing this problem for you and why they might be doing that. Then thinking of management, right? How do we prevent our cats from getting us up in the middle of the night? So there's a lot of things to think about here. The easiest solution is probably just closing your bedroom door, right? But a lot of cats will start yowling outside the door. That's pretty common. So that might not work for everybody. There might be more involved. So thinking about, are they getting enough to do during the day? Cats tend to be more nocturnal, right, than say dogs, but they oftentimes will be that way because they're not doing a lot during the day, right? Maybe they're not getting enough play sessions, maybe not enough exercise. And then thinking about the food aspect of it, right? Feral cats are eating between 5 and 10 small meals a day usually. So if you're just feeding your cat once or twice a day, that's not going to be enough, right? They're going to want to eat in the middle of the night. So setting that up, right, to kind of mimic that natural behavior, their natural eating cycles. um, and then providing things for them to do when you're not around, right? Things like food puzzles or toys, right? So that they don't have to wake you up in order to get something going so that they're not bored, right? Giving them something beforehand preemptively can go a long way in managing those sorts of behaviors. And then, just playing really good energy depleting games right before bedtime. Thinking about, kind of that natural cat motor pattern. Usually they're doing a hunt and then they're catching their prey, killing it, eating it, and then grooming and then sleeping. So when you're getting all of that in order, you really want to focus on setting it up so that they're playing and then eating, and then that leads to sleeping, right? So setting that up at the beginning of the night can go a really long way. Now, some of those things kind of blend into the training for this one, right? We want to teach them to do something else instead, and part of that is on us, right? We need to set them up so that they have something else to do instead. So you can get things like automated toys, right, and reward them for playing with those toys kind of throughout the day, so that they get used to them and like them. And then you can also get things like automated feeders, and you can actually set the times, right, to be in the middle of the night. If your cat is consistently getting you up at 3 in the morning, setting the automated feeder for 2:30, right, and just making it so that they don't need to wake you up, and that they're taken care of instead of waking you in the middle of the night when you are trying to sleep. All right, so these are some of the other examples that I listed. And now that we've gone through a couple of slides together, I'd really like to hear from you all in the audience. So just asking if anyone has any of these problems listed here or any others that you want to bring up about your cat. If so, I'd love to hear about it, and we can kind of go through the assessment that we did in those previous slides to figure out what the best way to overcome your challenges might be. So you guys are welcome to unmute if you have any questions about your cats at all. And if you don't want to talk out loud too, you can also put it in the chat. That's totally fine. All right. Well, if you think of something, go ahead and put that in the chat. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on to our dogs. So the formula for dealing with behavior challenges with dogs is pretty much the same as with cats, right? We're looking at the cause and then management and training. So these are some of the most common behavior challenges we see from dogs. Any of you that have dogs and take care of dogs will probably have seen these sorts of problems. And this is what we get most of our calls about, right? So things like jumping on people, pulling on leash, right? All of these things. So first, we're going to talk about jumping on people. And so, thinking again about what is the cause of jumping, right? How does that work for our dogs? What do they get out of it, right? So jumping gets our dogs closer to our faces, right? Which is really what they want if they're trying to greet us, right? They want to be up in our face. It can also express their internal excitement, and it feels good to them kind of inherently. And they also tend to get our attention for doing it, right? So even shoving our dogs down and saying no, that's still attention. And for some dogs, that really can just start the game, right? So once we've thought about kind of the causes, thinking about how we can manage this. How do we prevent our dogs from practicing jumping. So again, you're looking for patterns. When are they most likely to jump? Is it at the front door? Is it when you've been gone for a long time? Is it when they meet strangers, when they're on leash, right? So if they're jumping when you come through the front door, blocking off the front door so that they can't actually access you there, either keeping them in maybe a back room or behind a baby gate, or even keeping the front door itself kind of enclosed, right, in a little, like trifold gate sort of situation, right? That can give you a chance to kind of breathe before they jump on you, and it prevents them from actually getting to practice that. So that's a nice, simple way of kind of stopping that from happening. Now, if they're jumping when they're meeting people on leash or when they're meeting a new person for the first time, really thinking about, on leash, do they actually need to meet those people, or can you just ask those people to just not approach, right? Or even just saying, if it's somebody that's approaching, saying, don't give my dog any attention until, he's not jumping, right? Just thinking about how you can communicate with the other person so that your dog doesn't get put into that situation, and giving your dog enough space. So then we talk about training, right? What do we teach them to do instead? So we want a polite greeting from our dogs, right? We want them to maybe sit or lie down, or gently touch their nose to an outstretched hand, right? There's a lot of different things that we can teach them to do instead of jumping. So really focusing on rewarding them, again, just like what we talked about with the cats, right? Rewarding them if they approach you without jumping up on you, right? Like that's amazing. Good job. Keep doing that. And then we will have another presentation that's coming up, and that's called Help for Jumpy and Mouthy Dogs. So if you're really having trouble with this with your dog, definitely check that community connection event out, because we'll go in more depth about all of these different things in that presentation. Before I start with pulling on leash, does anyone have any questions specifically about dogs jumping on people and what the causes are and how to manage that? All right. Okay, so pulling on leash, the cause of this, right? Why does it work for your dog? What is your dog getting out of it? So your dog wants to go forward and the leash is stopping them, right? That's pretty much the long and short of it. You can also think about when they feel pressure against their chest or neck, they kind of want to push back against it. That's called the opposition reflex. So you can think, sometimes when you're petting your dog and you're really putting pressure on your dog, they lean into that pressure, right? They're not moving away from it. And that's just something that feels right to them. So it's the same with pulling, right? If they pull and we pull back, they're going to pull back harder, right? So then what else is rewarding about pulling on the leash? Usually if they're pulling, we will follow them forward. And so they get rewarded for pulling by having increased access to the environment, right? They get to keep moving forward, keep sniffing things, whatever it is, right? So they are definitely being kind of self-rewarded for this type of behavior. All right, so what do we do to manage this? How do we prevent our dogs from practicing pulling on leash? So there's a lot of things you can do here. Leash walking is a really difficult skill, right? But as far as managing goes, setting your dog up for success by maybe walking them in places where they're less likely to pull. So places with fewer interesting smells or fewer people or dogs, whatever it is that they generally tend to pull towards, right? Whatever they might be excited by. Just kind of avoiding that, setting yourself up to maybe go a little bit earlier in the day, or maybe on a different trail, right? Just kind of thinking about how you can set it up for them that it's easier. You can also try tiring your dog out before going for a walk. So you can do this with, if you have a yard, games in the backyard, things like fetch, or really just running around with your dog, anything that gets them exercising. You can also play tug, right? A lot of dogs really love to tug on a rope. And that can get a lot of energy out for dogs that enjoy that. So really anything that you can do to set it up so that the pulling on the leash is less likely to happen. Another thing that can help with this is proper walking equipment. So thinking about having a harness instead of just a collar, right? A harness with a front clip so that they aren't able to just pull against it and keep pulling, right? With a front clip, if they pull against the harness, they're actually kind of redirected to the side. So that actually allows you to kind of get their attention and get them back with you, right? So really focusing on not using any sorts of collars or prong collars or anything like that when you're walking a dog that pulls. It's also a really good idea to use a fixed length leash, not a retractable leash like in the picture here. Those retractable leashes, they go pretty far, but then they reach an end point, right? And that can be a really big jolt for a dog that is pulling ahead. And then if they're that far ahead of you, you have a lot less leverage, right? You're going to get pulled along because you can't stop them at that point. And the other thing about retractable leashes that I don't like, they can be kind of sharp. So if you're trying to like grab hold of the actual leash itself to stop your dog from pulling forward or whatever you might need to do, like an emergency stop, you can actually hurt your hand, right? So using a fixed length leash, a nylon 6 foot sort of leash, like they sell in stores. All right, so training. What do we teach them to do instead of pull, right? So what we want to do is teach them to walk within the length of the leash. We also want them to respond to any pressure on the leash by moving away from it and not into it, right? So if they reach the end of the leash, instead of pulling forward further, they actually come back and turn back towards us. Um, so definitely, working on rewarding them for any attention that they give us during the walks, right? We can reward them with praise. Oftentimes that's not going to be enough when you're out and about, right? There's a lot of things that are distracting out there. So rewarding them with things like treats, food of any type, right? And with dogs that really love play, you can actually reward them by playing with them, right? So thinking about, limiting your walks down to an area where they can be successful for the training, and then managing your other walks. So as much as possible, they don't get a chance to pull. All right. So again, I'm gonna kind of open this up. If anyone is experiencing, any of the problems that we talked about, or any of the ones listed here, or if you have your own that you want to bring up, you're welcome to unmute yourself and kind of ask there, or type it in the chat. Oh, and I see that I have a question in the chat already. So asking my opinion about using a gentle leader head collar. That's a great question. So the thing about the gentle leader, and for those of you who don't know, this is something that kind of goes over your dog's nose so that when they pull on the leash, their nose gets redirected to the side. So when you're looking at gentle leaders, it's really important to think of first the size of your dog, and then also how much they pull. Because if they're pulling a lot, that gentle leader is going to be, torquing their head kind of to the sides, right? And that can hurt their neck potentially if they're pulling hard enough. So we want to avoid, right, anything uncomfortable for our dogs on the walk, because that's going to make them, even more agitated and probably more likely to pull. The other thing about the gentle leader, a lot of dogs don't like things that go over their face. It's just pretty uncomfortable, just sort of by default. So unless you put in a lot of upfront training with a gentle leader, sometimes that's not the best, right? If your dog doesn't really happily, approach the gentle leader and stick their nose in it themselves, then that's probably not a great tool for you to be using with that dog. So yeah, thinking about, it because the concept of the gentle leader is very similar to the concept of the front clip harness, right? Where you're looking to a little bit redirect sort of their momentum, right? The head collar just uses their face, right, and their neck to redirect them versus the front clip harness, which is kind of just their whole body. So it's a little bit more comfortable for them. So that's a great question. Definitely, there's tons of walking equipment and tools out there. So it's good to be kind of educated about any sort of potential tool you might be using. All right. I see another question here from Maggie. Any tips for fear aggression towards other dogs? Yeah, so that's a great question. That's definitely a more complex behavior, right? Thinking about why are they afraid, and how are they reacting, and when are they reacting, right? So there's a whole lot of things that go into this. What I would say is thinking from that sort of management perspective, right? As much as possible, keeping them away from other dogs, right? If they're reacting on leash, thinking about similarly to that pulling on a leash topic that we discussed, setting yourself up so that they're just not seeing as many dogs, right? They're not looking around and expecting dogs to kind of come around the corner, right? So maybe going at less common times of day, or different trails, things with fewer people, fewer dogs, and really setting it up for them. And then as far as training goes for things like fear aggression, you really want to be changing how they feel about other dogs, right? And that can take a really long time. It's one of those things that's best done with the ongoing support of a trainer, right? Working with them over a long period of time to work on changing that underlying emotion, right? A lot of people, might just want to see the fear-based aggression just stop. But it's really important that we actually change how they're feeling about it, not just stopping them from expressing themselves, right? That's kind of the worry there, because they really are. They're just expressing themselves in that situation. And so we don't want to discourage them from that. We want to change the actual emotions that lead to that expression. So yeah, definitely I would recommend working with a trainer on something like fear aggression. And in the recap email that we send out, I'll be sending out a handout that's called How to Find a Qualified Trainer. And that has some links to trainer databases and different questions and things you should look for in a trainer. So hopefully that can help you out. All right, I'm seeing a question from Josh here. It says, my dog is about to turn 2 years old and has started attempting to hump other dogs, even though he is fixed. He also starts barking very loudly when we get in the car to take him to the dog park, and gets very excited and jumpy in the back seat and doesn't settle down until we're on the road. Yeah, that's definitely a pretty common problem with a lot of dogs, right? The humping behavior, it's a natural dog behavior, right? And even though our dogs are most of them fixed, right? We still can sometimes see that from our dogs. It can be sort of playful. It can be sometimes excited, sometimes nervous, right? So there's a lot of things that could potentially be going into that. But it sounds like your dog might be doing that out of excitement, right? Since what you're saying, right, barking a lot when you're getting in the car and getting really jumpy, all of that. So that might all be kind of together in that situation. So thinking about, maybe trying to work on managing the energy levels. So maybe instead of, taking your dog to the dog park to drain some energy, starting by draining some energy at home, right? Again, setting them up to be just a little bit more tired when you're going to interact with other dogs. You can also try to set it up so that those environments maybe aren't so exciting and overwhelming, right? Maybe a dog park with fewer dogs. There's the big ones at like the Santa Fe Animal Shelter or Frank Ortiz right here in Santa Fe, but there's also some smaller ones kind of scattered throughout town. So looking to maybe go to one of those or to go at a time when there's just fewer people at the dog park, so that even if he is really excited, right, you can, get a little bit of a walk and a sniff in before he maybe encounters another dog, just so that he has time to calm himself down again. So definitely looking at how you can manage it so that he's a little bit calmer, and then also as far as training goes, right, thinking about maybe using some kind of a recall or a positive interrupter, right, where you're basically teaching your dog to come to you when you call, so that you can call him away from other dogs if he kind of starts to look like he's gonna get into that sort of play, right, or that sort of activity, and kind of stopping it before it starts, right? Rewarding for being able to redirect that excitement to something else, to maybe behaviors he already knows. So as much as possible, trying to look and notice kind of his precursor behaviors to when he starts, interacting with other dogs that way, and then being able to stop him before he starts doing that. That's a really good question. All right, a question from Loretta. I have a 5.5-month-old Shih Tzu. Three questions and concerns I would like advice on. Jumping on the dining room table and couches, digging holes in the backyard, and fairly house trained, but randomly poops in places around the house, maybe once a week. All right, yeah. So jumping on the tables and couches, that's definitely a harder one, right? Because it's hard to just block off an entire dining room table, right? So I guess kind of looking at, when is your dog jumping up on the table, right? Is that just when meals are coming out, or is it kind of all the time? And if it's when meals are coming out, maybe setting them up with something more fun to do in a different space, a different room, something like a stuffed Kong or other food type items that they can chew on. So really just preventing them from even being in that same space, right? And looking at how you can set them up so that they are also getting rewarded with food, but for doing something that you're looking for, right? Couches, you might try, maybe blocking the couches, or as much as possible, getting again that energy out, right? Sometimes the jumping up on things is all about having a lot of energy, and kind of moving around like that, especially for the young ones, right? They get the zoomies and things like that, and they'll just bounce off of everything. So kind of thinking about, how can we drain that energy in more constructive ways? And again, thinking about how you can redirect your dog off the couch if they get on the couch. A lot of the times, especially with small dogs, we just want to go over and grab them and put them on the floor again. But that can become kind of a game, right? Now you're interacting with them in this sort of physical way. And so they're thinking, every time I jump on the couch, we start this game, and then I jump on the couch again, right? So it kind of, snowballs into this. So instead, thinking about, okay, I see that your dog is about to go towards the couch, right? You can just see that kind of look and that little like tension in their arms, right, before they start to jump. And so thinking about being able to recognize that and distract right away. So having a toy, having food, before they ever jump on the couch, right? And then teaching an alternative behavior for that, the training side. So again, jumping is one of those things that is, kind of ubiquitous throughout all dogs, right? It is a natural behavior that they like doing, but obviously very inconvenient for us. So we want to teach them that something else is more rewarding than jumping up. So teaching a behavior like a settle on a mat, right, or go to your bed, right, and really working very hard on that behavior and making it really really rewarding while you're keeping the dining room table and the couches kind of blocked off. If your dog is using like a chair to jump up onto the dining room table, maybe making sure all the chairs are like tucked in or upside down or something so that they can't get in there. If you can block off the dining room, just doing that. Couches, again, going to be a little bit harder to just block off entirely, but maybe putting something like laundry hampers or other things, right, that just kind of make the couch a less inviting space. That can go a long way too. All right, so for digging holes in the backyard. So again, digging is a really natural, good dog behavior. Lots of dogs love to dig. But yes, very annoying when our dogs are kind of digging up the entire backyard, right? So something that I might recommend for that is kind of creating a designated digging box for your dog, and encouraging them, if you're seeing them digging everywhere in the backyard, if they're somewhere else, just kind of encouraging them towards the digging spot and rewarding them for digging there. So you can do that with food, with attention, praise, with joining them in the digging, right? Just kind of putting your hands in the dirt and doing that. Some dogs can find that a lot of fun, right? So anything you can find to reward them for digging where they're supposed to dig, and just redirecting them when they might be digging in other places. And of course, it's not possible in all yards, but if there's like a certain area that they're digging in, maybe putting up a fence, one of those just like chicken wire type fences. So, not too expensive and not too labor intensive, but just to block off those sorts of garden areas and places where we really don't want them digging. And yeah, then encouraging them to do that in appropriate places. And then for house training, it's harder for the small dogs, especially for young dogs, right? They're still kind of getting in the habit of the house training. So really thinking about potentially keeping a like a house training journal. So writing down every time that they're going to the bathroom, and kind of looking at any patterns that you might notice. The kind of once a week time when they're pooping randomly in the house. It might not be totally random, right? Maybe it's coming after really intense play, or something mildly stressful, or maybe it's at 3 p.m. if they haven't gone out, right? So kind of looking at the whole equation, searching for those sorts of patterns, and then really focusing on how can I get the dog outside before we see this happening, right? Obviously, we can't be supervising our dogs, 24/7. But if you're in a situation where you can kind of keep an eye on your dog, um, kind of looking for those again precursor behaviors, right? Thinking about how your dog is acting, right? Are they sniffing the ground and kind of circling around, right? Those can sometimes indicate that. And really just focusing on how you can set your dog up so that she's already gone to the bathroom, or they've already gone to the bathroom, right? And so hopefully that can kind of make things a little bit easier, as far as the house training goes. And Maggie, I see that you're asking about particular local trainers good with fear aggression. I don't have specific recommendations because everybody's services have kind of changed because of COVID, and the trainers are always kind of coming and going and all of that. So I will send out that handout, and then those trainer databases, often you can search based on location. So that might be a good resource there. And Loretta, again, destroying his bed, created a hole in it and pulls out the filling and sewing it back together. Yeah, yeah, that's definitely something that a lot of dogs like to do, right? Again, that kind of comes from that sort of, dissecting, sort of tearing apart behavior that again is a natural dog behavior, but very inconvenient for us. Um, Something that you might try doing is giving him other things that are similar textures to his bed, and maybe taking his usual bed, that the one that you had to sew today, taking that kind of out of the picture for a little bit, giving him something else to kind of destroy and work on. There's a lot of different toys that might be kind of similar to that. And then thinking about getting some kind of a like a canvas cover or something like that for the bed that you have for him, just because sometimes that can be just durable enough that maybe it's not so worth it anymore to tear it apart instead of like the nice fluffy ones or something like that. They also make durable brands of beds that maybe would kind of withstand little teeth. So kind of looking at the options that are out there, and again, giving those alternative toys that he can destroy. There's a really cool toy. It's called a Terrible, like Tear, Terrible, and it actually is specifically made to be torn apart. So it's Velcroed, and you can like pull off the legs and things like that, and then you can just put it back together, and they can tear it apart again. So something like that, right? Something that he's able to just tear apart over and over, might be a fun toy for him, and something that kind of gets out his desire to do that. And then, of course, providing chews, right, throughout the day. Things, like bully sticks, maybe, or any other sorts of chew toys that really get his mouth working, so that he has, again, something constructive to chew on versus destructive, right? That's a good question. All right. Any other questions at all about any sorts of behaviors that you're seeing from your pets that you have questions about? Okay. All right. So, what are your next steps with all of this? You just got a lot of information thrown at you and kind of this formula for coming after behavior challenges. If you're experiencing something that you think needs a little bit more of sort of an in-depth training tips specific to your situation, you can reach out to us at our behavior help desk. That's our email address here, training@sfumanesociety.org, and then our phone number as well. So you can reach us at either of those. And if you're experiencing behavior problems that will likely require the long-term assistance from a trainer, something like that fear aggression that we talked about earlier. Again, searching for a qualified trainer to support you over that long term. Somebody who uses reward-based methods, really focuses on changing the emotions of your animal, and who gives you ideas for both management and training, just like we talked about here. So if you're not hearing that from a potential trainer, I would look elsewhere, right? Dog training is an unregulated industry, so it's really important to you and to your dog to find a good qualified trainer out there. So again, I'll be sending out that handout for you all. All right, are there any last questions at all before we close out here? Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Purina again for making this community connection event possible. And I want to thank all of you for coming. I really, really appreciate your support of the shelter. And if you learned even one thing from this presentation that you found useful, please consider donating so that we can continue to provide these services free of charge to the community. And I really appreciate your time here, and I hope you got a lot of good information. So thank you all for supporting the shelter, and I'll get that recap email out to you soon.